founder and president of a company called Etna Interactive. Many of you we already know well. Some of you will be newer to the webinar series today. We are very excited to have Karen Zupko of Karen Zupko Associates, Inc. on the line with us today. I want to talk briefly about why it is that we are, why we've invited Karen to participate in this webinar today. Probably one of the most common questions that we receive from our clients and our friends in the industry relates to how to approach for consultations, whether that approach should involve a fee, whether that fee should be applied to surgery, and if you haven't charged a fee in the past, how do you go about making that conversion? You know, our goal at Etna Interactive is to get our clients to the place where they have too many consultation requests coming in, and that they're struggling with challenges like this, which is, you know, what do I do when I really have, I think, the freedom and the luxury to look closely at applying things like consultation fees to the way that we approach those patient interactions. I have known Karen. I've worked with Karen on many accounts now for, gosh, almost 20 years. And she just continues to impress me, not only for the thought leadership that she provides, but for the both fiery and practical advice that she gives on really the best ways to operate from everything from marketing to staff development. So that said, I'd like to welcome Karen to the call. Karen, are you there with us? I'm here. Can you hear me? Excellent. Thank you so much for being on the line with us today. I want to turn this presentation over to you because you're the reason why everybody is here, and ask you to tell us all about that move from free to fee consultations. I want to do that because I love being associated with being profitable, Ryan. And if we go to the next slide, there you will see, if we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I am the tall blonde in the back row in the center. And I do encourage you to, if you're new, you haven't met us, to please sign up for our KZA alerts for plastic surgery. Well, today I have a BHAG for us. And a BHAG, if you're not familiar with it, is a big, hairy, aggressive goal. And that big, hairy, aggressive goal is to make price irrelevant. And if you say to me, Karen, I'm not sure we can do that, we're sitting here sort of scared, I want you to at least agree that our goal today is to make price, the fee for that initial consultation, less relevant. All right? So if we can agree on that. Let me show you the kind of Debbie and Dr. Downer thinking that I sometimes encounter, and I'm sure going to hope that this is not the thought bubble that is above your head or above the head of the doctor. Because I have to say this, if you lack the self-confidence in your surgical results, in the service that you provide, charging is going to be difficult. If you don't think you're worth it, how can you possibly make a patient feel that? And I want to show you something that is evidence of the self-fulfilling prophecy. We were engaged by an academic institution in the Midwest to survey, that happened to be rhinoplasty fees, but we were engaged to see what other people in the immediate market, in other words, within about a 12-mile radius, were charging. And you can see that there was tremendous variation. And we're going to talk about the information that you see on the right-hand column. I hope everybody has a pen and paper because I've got a lot of material to go over in a short time. We are going to talk about the sort of midpoint position of applying the surgical, the consultation fee to surgery. And you can see that the results here were 4 no's, 3 yeses. Okay? So keep that in mind. This is a big question for you. Who do you want to attract as patients? Is it just your objective to fill all the consultation lines with names? I don't think it's a very good goal. Research done by Paul Wang, who's at the Kellogg School of Business, affiliated with Northwestern University, a long paper, and this is what it boils down to. There's 2 types of buyers. Further research by others shows that relationship buyers are far more profitable. They're more likely to bill aesthetic treatments, injectables, laser treatments, some of the other kinds of things you offer. They're more likely to book surgery, and they're more likely to refer friends. So our goal is to help you create positive relationships and build those, strengthen those over time. Transaction buyers, on the other hand, are people who come for the price and they'll leave for the price. And there is always somebody who is also offering free consults who's going to lowball your surgical fee. So I want you to keep that in mind. And certainly on the non-surgical treatments, the aesthetic treatments, Groupon has proven this time and time and time again. There's always some darn fool who's going to do it for less. Well, fee myth number one that we need to dispel is that all patients buy on price. They all want a deal. Geez, you know, that's just not true. And let me show you why. If all people wanted a deal, nobody would be buying Tesla. Nobody would be buying Hermes handbags. They'd all be carrying paper bags. Kiehl's would not have self-standing stores filled with expensive lotions, potions, and other wonderful goods. Your dog Fido would only be eating Alpo if all anyone was concerned about was price. And, geez, nobody would be drinking a Belvedere or other high-end martini. We'd all be sipping Smirnoff. So price is obviously not the only goal. And again, I don't come to these conclusions lightly on my own on a given Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday afternoon. I've done a lot of reading and research, and I hope that you'll follow up on some of my recommended readings. If you Google Michael Silverstein, there's a whole series of articles about childless women, either because their kids have left or they never had children to begin with, who have money and who represent a very important and often neglected customer. But the phrase from Michael Silverstein's book, Trading Up, that I want to emphasize with you is, people will pay a significant premium for goods and services that are emotionally important to them. And if people aren't willing to pay for your services, perhaps it's because you've not tapped into that emotional component. Again, research shows, Joseph Pine's book about the experience economy asks whether you're creating distinctive, differentiated first calls that describe the consult and why it's worth it. Again, another book, maybe you just want to go online and read some reviews. Fee myth number two, everyone else is doing free consults, so I need to too. Well, if you don't accept this line of reasoning from your kids, or as a kid, my line of reasoning like this was certainly not accepted by my parents, I don't think you should use this flawed, weak, flimsy sort of rationale to run your practice. Very expensive, very expensive. And again, John Kenneth Galbraith gives us a wonderful piece of advice. It is painful to think, to create a strategy, and to implement a tactic. But I'm pretty confident we can do that. For a long time, I've said that failing to charge for consults is expensive. I have evidence of that. I've turned probably 36 practices around in the last couple of years. And it is true that some of your competitors aren't charging, and they do have patients, you have patients who schedule, but not nearly at the same number that you would if there was a barrier to entry, if it wasn't an open door policy. If in fact you believed in the power of the velvet rope, as we call it, you would have a more qualified, a vetted, a more interested patient population. And I want to make this point. I've seen it time and time again. When it is that we have a free consult, there is more badgering, more negotiating going on when the patient is in the patient care coordinator's office and looking at the quote. Well, free turns you into a commodity. Commodities are undifferentiated from one another. They're all alike. Commoditization means you have no pricing power. On the other hand, a differentiated practice, a differentiated aesthetic practice provides patients with specific benefits, not features. Let me quickly distinguish that. If you have an ASC, that is a feature. You have to turn it into a benefit for the patient. A benefit would be the privacy. A benefit would be a much lower infection rate because you're only doing, in quotes, clean surgery. You've really got to look at everything that you have probably been describing as a feature and think about how it benefits a specific group of patients. That is one of the things that gives you pricing power. Well, let me also assure you that patients do not buy solely on price. They get to yes because the equation works. And I want to make this point. If the patient comes for that free consult and doesn't connect with the surgeon, or they sort of like the surgeon, but it's so-so, but they don't particularly like or understand the plan as it was related to them, it doesn't make any difference how low the fee is. They're not going to get to yes. So I really encourage you to have a more encompassing, a 360-degree review about how we get to yes. And of course, reputation matters, and that's a subject that Ryan is really quite expert in, reputation management. Well, this is a key point, and I hope everybody has a pen and a pencil and jots this down. So I was blown away by this book by Dan Ariely, Predictably Irrational, about how all of us make goofy decisions. So he talks about something called the anchor price. And I want to acknowledge up front, if you are in a market where the majority of your perceived competition are offering free consults, that free has in fact become an anchor price in the patient's mind. What does that mean? Well, it means you need to be able to differentiate on that first call. And you say, but is that really possible? Does that happen? And the answer is yes. And you probably have experienced that. You're contributing to that. Let me give you an example. Patty, my colleague in my graphics department, ran around the corner to Starbucks, and she said a brewed venti coffee with choice of Pike, the medium roast, or Komodo Dragon dark roast, here in the city of Chicago is $3.26. Just up the street, the same size coffee at Dunkin' Donuts is $2.27. Folks, that's a 99-cent difference. I want you to think about that. A little less than a third, a 99-cent difference. It makes the point. There is a line at the little mini Starbucks around the corner. Every brand has its customer, and every surgical practice has its patient. You are not everybody's doctor. And I've got to say this. They are not a half a block apart. Starbucks has not lowered their price to match Dunkin' Donuts. And you all know there's a million examples of this. Well, let's get into the first thing. If you think that you would like to begin introducing the notion of some sort of charge in that initial phone conversation, then option one is for you. So if you haven't committed yet, despite my very powerful evidence, if you haven't decided to start charging for consults, you at least can do this. And I did this for a practice on Spalding Drive in Beverly Hills that experienced a 40% no-show rate for breast augmentation patients coming in for that free consult. At the very least, we began taking a credit card guarantee, and we would charge the card, we would refund it if they came in, okay? We had to do something about the 40% no-show rate because we were double and triple booking, and then we ran late, and then everybody did come, and then it was a giant mess, and everybody was unhappy. And now they would go and blast you online. So a credit card guarantee, even if you decide to remain free, is an option. Well, you recognize this question, don't you? And I'm focusing pretty much on breast augs because that is really where we see the greatest amount of price sensitivity. You recognize this caller. I want to make 3 points about this slide, and I hope you will pick up your pen and make a couple of relevant notes. Number 1, if this is the first thing out of the caller's mouth, she is what Dr. Paul Wang would call a transaction buyer. There is no introduction, there is no other question. It's what do you charge for an aug? It is a frontal assault. So you already know this person's mindset. You've done a little bit of a mind and a wallet biopsy. You have got a price shopper supreme. What would I say to her? I'd say, sure, Brittany, I'd love to answer your question and any others that you have. But I do need to know who I'm speaking with, and I sort of gave it away. I was thinking about Brittany. So she needs to give us her name, all right? Because now I have her name, and I can really go and use that to personalize the call. And I might then ask her another question. Geez, do you have a price in mind that you're looking for? The art of asking questions is largely lost in plastic surgery practices. They have no ability to sell, which means you ask questions. It's all a tell. I would never directly answer this question. I might also ask her and say, gosh, what kind of research have you done? Do you have a particular type of implant in mind? I want her to do more talking. You will be more successful. I'd like to know if she's been to our website. Another very valuable question. Have you seen some of our before and afters? And the third point I want to make is that you can have different protocols and different fees for breast augmentation patients than you do for others, such as facelift or rhinoplasty patients. Those facelift patients are typically not focused first on fees. So there is no rule that says that you have to have one consultation fee that fits all. Some of the practices that we work very successfully with have a $100 consultation fee for patients seeking facial rejuvenation. It's a much more complicated consult than it used to be, certainly in the 80s when I was talking to plastic surgeons. And your breast aug patients are typically your most price sensitive. One other suggestion there, and as many of you know, I have been a consultant with CareCredit going now for 10 years. And I think one of the very constructive things you can do if you insist on remaining free for breast augmentation consultations is to encourage people to go online through a custom link on your website to apply for CareCredit. That will give you the advantage if they go and apply through your website and a custom link. You will get a report that shows what they were approved for. So a practice we recently worked with saw 10 patients in the previous month who were all approved for up to $499 for that free consult. I would suggest that that was a waste of those consultation slots. Well, what's option 2? Option 2 may be very comfortable one for many of you. You're going to charge a consultation fee, and I would really argue that for 45 minutes to an hour of your physician's time, that a breast aug consult at $50 is really a bargain, in fact, a steal. But you're going to decide in these classes of surgical procedures what the consultation fee is, and you're going to say, we'd like you to guarantee that with a credit card. We find that that helps people remember their appointment or call to cancel if they're not coming. And if you come in and schedule within 60 days of your consult, we will deduct that from your surgical fee. Okay? I will also tell you that on an occasion, I will always remember at a course I was giving at the Aesthetic Society, one doctor who charges quite a bit more than $100 turned to a colleague who he's friendly with and said, Steve, has it ever occurred to you that patients who've booked with me are seeing you for a free second opinion? I'd like you to write down, are we in the business of providing free second opinions? It's a very valid question. Well, we've got another choice for you. This one really would require more description and more language and ifs and ands, but I wanted to be sure that you had this option out there. So in this one, we offer patients, again, coming in for breast augmentation. This is the only procedure this applies to. The patient has two choices. They can come in for a complimentary, I'd like you to lose the word free, a complimentary group consultation with a private exam. We offer those twice a month. You would not, it's not a seminar, okay? Lose the notion of a seminar, delete. It is a complimentary group consultation. There will be 4 patients there, no husbands, no significant others, and that may be an option for you. Or you can have an individual consult that'll be an hour long with Dr. Repute, and it's $100 and includes here the Vectra imaging and an opportunity to bring clothing and use the sizers. And I structured this on purpose in this way because the Vectra imaging would be one way that even if I wasn't offering group consults, that I would establish the value of seeing us. And I would have receptionists who were well able, with great enthusiasm, to describe the benefit of this technology. Some practices that we've worked with have a great patient care coordinator of long standing who encourages gals to bring to the consult several articles of clothing, and they will spend up to an hour, because they have enough exam rooms to do this, trying on clothes with the sizers. So it depends, but these are differentiated factors, okay? So you have to have something extra, something, and this is another irony to me. We recently, Glenn Morley, my associate, and I did a workshop in Nashville, and there were people who had Vectra who were not mentioning that in the initial phone call and along with the consultation fee. That to me is a very missed opportunity. You know this patient. You know that tone, you know that expression, sort of semi-bullying. You charge for consults, the other doctors don't. Well, they ask, you answer. Please pick up your pen. When you are faced with this sort of patient, do not rush to disagree, disabuse, challenge, argue, defend, or correct. And do not counter her objection to your consultation fee with, well, the doctor's board certified. The board certification has nothing to do with it, and likely, if you are listening in San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Miami, Dallas, or any other metropolitan city, there are probably 10 other board-certified plastic surgeons within less than a 10-mile drive. if you're on Spalding in Beverly Hills, there are probably 5 an elevator away. So she's not debating the doctor's credentials, she's debating the fact that you charge. So the first thing I would do is I would agree. That's true, we do. And again, hopefully you've gotten her name. I would say, Libby, our patients value the time that Dr. Smart spends with them personally in the 45-minute consultation. So if your doctor is not rushing, is taking the time to do a whole lot of the counseling him or herself, you've got to sell that. It has value. Our patients value the unrushed personal touch that Dr. Smart has to offer. And Libby, our post-op patients tell us we are well worth it. So if it's all about the fee, you're going to know that. When you say our post-op patients tell us we are worth it, please then stop talking. Be quiet. The ball is now in the patient's court. It is her move to fill the silence. Might she hang up? Yes, of course. And in preparation for this, I want to thank Ryan because I called a whole group of the practices we work with who do charge in very competitive areas. I said, about how many patients do you think you lose a week who just hang up on you? Between 2 and 3. I will maintain that those are 2 and 3 valuable slots that you now have for patients who are more viable candidates and more likely to accept your surgical proposition. Well, now we get to this another point of comparison. Wow, you are so much more than the other surgeons just down the street. And of course, here you are wondering, are they board certified? Are they real plastic surgeons or not? So again, don't argue, rush, defend, explain, ask a question. Well, there are quite a few doctors in the area. Do you mind telling me who you saw? And then pause and be quiet. And let's suppose your consultation fee is, go back to my rhinoplasty slide, you will remember that there was a doctor who charged $125. There were competitors who charged $50, right? So there could be somebody else who charges, but you are charging more. Why do you guys charge so much more? Well, one of the questions that I have is, wow, tell me what is so much more? Is it $50? If it's $50, again, let's remind ourselves of what the differential is likely to be when that patient comes and sits in your patient care coordinator's office. Help me understand what is so much more. And again, have you been there for a consult? I'd start asking more questions. Was it worth it? Did you spend an extended period of time with the physician, or is this a practice that charges no consultation fees because you spend all your time with patient, so-called patient counselors? So again, think of a list of relevant questions that you will ask in a friendly tone of voice, not in a challenging or defensive one. Here's another example. And I want you to please write this down, because whether it is on the phone in the initial call or in the patient care coordinator's office, this is a question that has great leverage and strength. Wow, if you are making this decision solely on price, why haven't you scheduled there? Well, and this is, again, practical experience since the beginning of the year. I've had this conversation. Patient care coordinator was too timid. I was shadowing, And I said, wow, let me just ask a question here as the outside party. If you're making this decision solely based on price, why didn't you schedule there? And there's a long pause on the part of the patient because everybody says you're best. Well, there's a price for best, folks. Ask more questions. Well, one of the problems that we have encountered, and I certainly hope that it's not one for the people on this call. Sometimes staff have a difficult time discussing money, asking for money, if they're not sure that the patient's experience is going to be worth it, that the surgical results and that the service satisfaction aren't really up to the fee being charged. And that explains the reluctance. One of your tasks, so if you're sort of the gal who's had her angry 11 somewhat softened by, I suspect, a Botox injection, if you want to look like the happy gal, she knows because they survey their patients. So she has data and statistics, and she can say, you know, our patients who've seen us in consultation and paid that $100 consultation fee, 93% say that it was a good investment, that we're worth it. Okay? So she has some data and some facts. She believes in their post-op surveys. She believes in her doctor. They all try hard every single time to provide a superior experience. When it is that your office is chock-a-block with free patients, very often who are no-shows, admit it, your ability to deliver a smooth, flawless, Fred Astaire and Ginger-like dance of a consultation experience is really limited. People are wandering up and down the halls. I see this. Who's in room 2? Where's the doctor, right? The office is semi-chaotic. It is not an upscale experience. So I think one of your homeworks is to have a session where everybody in the staff goes through what the practice unique service propositions are. What are your USPs? Why are we worth it? We're going to write it down. We're going to take notes. This is going to become second nature to all of us to explain why we are worth it. The business literature is very clear in Karen's reading list that price is what you offer when you have nothing else. Nobody is the low-cost provider on purpose. So practice makes perfect. And I love Louis Pasteur. I have a little saying that I look at in my drawer. I open it up, and it says, chance favors the prepared mind. And I do think this is not as simple as snapping your fingers, flipping the light switch, and saying, okay, we're on for charging. And I always think of a certain doctor, Enrique Fernandez, who practiced in Fort Lauderdale for many years, who came to a course with his nurse, and they said, okay, we're going to charge. They did practice sessions for 3 weeks during staff meetings, and they practiced handling the objections of one person talking on the phone, calling into the conference room, dealing with the questions. They practiced with each other, and then they did another really valuable thing. They called other high-end establishments. So if you call the Ritz or the Four Seasons for a reservation, they are going to ask for your credit card. When in the conversation do they do that? It's not their opening remark. But if you would like a room at one of those upscale hotels, they will ask for a credit card guarantee. And I think it's really important you have the experience of listening to not just the words, but the tone and the ease with which people make that request. I think if you call some high-end spas, not necessarily med spas, but for a massage, you will discover that they ask for a credit card guarantee. If you have, there are some admirable practices that your doctor admires, I would suggest that you make some mystery calls and see how those practices bring up the consultation fee and perhaps ask for the credit card guarantee. So practice makes perfect, and it's not as easy as just doing this. I do hope that you've all written down, though, some of my key questions, because it really will help you to move out of that sort of playing defense and seeing the patient more as a possible customer. And not everybody's your customer. So I want to thank you for your time and attention. And Ryan, if we've got some questions, let's go.
We do. We've got those keyed up. Now, before I start asking those questions, first, Karen, let me say thank you so much for joining myself and Etna Interactive today for this webinar. I want to remind all of our attendees, I've got a bunch of questions teed up already, but if there's a question that you would like to have answered, use the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. You may have to click the plus sign to open it up. Type in your question, and I'll pose that to Karen now. Now, one of the first questions, Karen, that came up is that you gave the example of a practice that had invested in Vectra and then failed to talk about Vectra as one of the assets, one of the values that the patient would receive when they come in for presentation or for the consultation. So the question that came in is, what are some of the other examples of value adds that come up during consultations that practices are offering to sort of explain or justify the, other than the value of the surgeon's time, charging for a consultation?
Well, first of all, the surgeon's time, anybody that thinks that it's not worth it, plastic surgeons are typically, after our neurosurgery clients and some subspecialties of orthopedics, have spent the longest period of time in school. So I would make the case, some of you have TouchMD, some of you have other kinds of imaging. Some of our clients make the point, more on the East Coast, the consultation the charge for the consultation is $200, and they make the point that that covers 2 visits. So the initial visit and then the go home, I want to think about it and come back. So they go ahead and they make those second appointments, which they then, call and confirm. And we discover that patients who come back that second time may have seen another doctor and may bring with them another proposal for us to discuss, dissect, and explain why we didn't suggest that or wouldn't suggest what that was. That also offers us a certain piece of market intelligence. In some practices, you have an esthetician, and for facial surgery, you don't optimize that esthetician as a part of the consultation process. She's going to talk with you about skin care because the surface of your skin needs attention, as well as those underlying structures that the surgeon talks about. And don't worry, we're not going to strong-arm you into walking out with a huge basket of lotions and potions. In fact,
that's my least favorite part of spa experiences.
And our more but our more clever surgeons actually take a group of core products and make that invisible, opaque to the patient, and just include it in the surgery fee.
Yeah, and I definitely, I think what I heard you say in there is if there's unique technology offered that's a differentiator that adds value to the experience, highlight that. If there's additional staff involvement, highlight that. The value of the doctor's time and training, highlight that. Would there be another kind of big bullet point for practices that are looking on developing their script for how to answer those consultation fee objections that you would call out?
Well, if people, again, Ryan, bothered to survey patients post-consult.
they'll get a lot of the answers there.
You will get a lot. You will have statistics. You will have value to present. So many of the people on this call undoubtedly survey patients post-op. And yes, you can use that. But the point is, I think feedback on how our consultation was hitting or missing the mark is really important to process improvement.
Excellent. So one of the administrative questions that come up is just about the presentation today. We are recording it. This will be made available in our Learning Center in about 1 week's time. We'll send all of the registrants the link so you can watch this again with members of your staff. Karen, the next question that comes up, though, is about sort of fighting an internal battle. And one of our attendees writes that she has been making the case that they should be charging for consultations inside their practice for some time, that they have some fear on the part of the doctor, and she's not made progress in moving the policy forward. Obviously, other than watching this webinar, how do you recommend that a member of staff goes to leadership, goes to the doctor or the practice manager, and makes the case for moving in this direction?
I want to know who that person is, and I encourage her to please write me at info@KarenZupko.com, because
Okay.
I admire her initiative and interest and courage. Let me tell the story of the two Lisas. There was Lisa in Beverly Hills who said, we can't charge, nobody will come, she was just the negative nabob. And eventually I persuaded the doctor that he needed to free Lisa because she really didn't like him. And then, and this is God's honest truth, they were both named Lisa. Then there was Lisa, who is working for a wonderful facial plastic surgeon on the west coast of Florida, who was a true Southern gentleman, produced beautiful results, was, you know, in his mid-50s prime, doing free consults. And Lisa the Good, I call her, Lisa the Good tried to explain to the good doctor why he should be charging for consults, and he said, oh, nobody will, you know, what if nobody comes, and, you know, the whole litany of sorrows, myth 1 and myth 2. So Lisa the Good just decided on her own. She said to the receptionist, all the new consults, send them over to me, and she initiated the consultation fee herself. And it was some period of time later, like a month to 6 weeks, before the doctor said, wow, look at my surgery schedule is so much more full, and everything is going beautifully, that he discovered her having taken the bull by the proverbial horns. And I want to also make the point that he was very pleased at the end of the year. He regarded me a co-conspirator in this project, but he was very pleased at the end of the year to discover that her charging for consultation fees covered approximately half of her salary. And I always joke with people, Ryan, when I was young and working at the American Medical Association, my motto was, it was better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So,
interesting observation. We have a similar anecdote. We have a clinic that had a sort of a backfire event where the doctor wanted to see, he's a little bit older, wanted to see fewer liposuction cases, started charging for consultation fees for liposuction only, and they actually saw their volume of liposuction cases go up as a result. So be careful where you implement. You were going to add something.
Exactly. I want to say one other thing. I have been successful, if you're worried about trying this, try it with a group, a series of procedures that you do want to do, taking your point, Ryan, and why don't you say, we would like to try this for 1 quarter, and this is what our patient acceptance rate has typically been. So, Ryan, this is a really key point. Most of the people listening today are using one of the branded specialty-specific softwares.
Sure.
So I always say, geez, if you knew how many consults you had year to date, if you, for this or that, and you knew what your patient acceptance rate was, some of you call it a conversion rate, which I hate, but it's the number of people seen in consultation for a procedure who have that procedure. You would have your baseline data, and you could say to the doctor, look, from September to the end of the year, for this group of procedures, we would like to see, would like to try this. We're going to work very hard at it, and let's see how our statistics look for this last third of the year compared to the previous two-thirds. Doctors are driven by data, and so it's not your opinion or your hunch. It'll be facts and figures.
Yeah, I think the trial and a measured or rigorous trial is definitely going to be the best way to win. But you highlighted in your presentation the importance of training. The example you gave of the practice that actually practiced their scripts, they worked on answering the objections, they had defined that unique service proposition in advance to really arm the staff with the skills that are required to be able to do this and do it well. And I think arguably that's going to influence every patient interaction you have. If you're training well, you're going to be more effective. I know that you offer that training, but if we were just to generalize and say, you know, the component of a good rollout plan in terms of staff development and training they would involve these 3 to 5 things. What are the big components for those practices that are going to try to do it on their own to really be successful in deploying a fee for their consultations? What would the rough outline of their plan look like?
Well, the first thing they need to do is to outline what their unique service propositions are.
Okay,
how are we not necessarily better? How are we different than the people who we perceive to be our nearest competitors?
Okay.
How are we different? So it may be that one of the things that I would say is my consultation fee is justified by the fact that we see patients within 15 minutes of their appointment time. And I can guarantee you that if you are running a free afternoon of consultations, virtually nobody is seen on time because the first 2 or 3 don't come in at all. I mean, I've just been doing this too long. So if you were on time, I would justify my higher fee if I offered consultation times that were convenient to women who work. Again, refer the Silverstein literature, for God's sake. So the busiest hairstylist in New York, who does blonde hair, which I know something about, starts seeing clients at 7:30 in the morning. And who do you find in there? Women doctors that I know. So you've got to do, as Gypsy Rose Lee said, you've got to have a gimmick. What's different? What's different? And saying, my doctor's board certified and he's been doing this for 25 years. There's a point at which experience may not be seen as an advantage. I mean,
so
if I'm coaching the younger doctor, I'm going to know how to sell against that. But many people never did debate. So you're going to do your USPs. You're going to have something to offer that is unique, that establishes why you're worth it. You are going to go through every one of those objections. Why do you charge so much? You are going to practice so that the words roll off of your tongue as easily as when somebody says, what is your name?
And are you a fan, Karen, of scripting or more just general talking points and trusting the team to develop?
I have seen some perfectly ridiculous scripts, and the person on the phone sounds like she is reading a script. So you write out the script. You practice the words. I don't just burp the first thing on the slide. I go over it. You read it out loud. You say it to one another.
Yeah,
So you're
I
never
could agree
going
more
to
that
get
practice.
word for word. But the idea of scripting, we charge a consultation fee because, and I've seen a software system that tried to do this, and when I've had people mystery shop that practice, they sound robotic.
Robotic, yeah. I would agree. I think the talking points and having staff that are comfortable enough with the underlying message that they can ad-lib effectively against those are a great way to go. Now, Karen, we only have a minute of time left for 2 more questions. There's more on the screen, but the first one that comes up is, we talked a lot today about the sample of breast augmentation and the plastic surgery space. We have a lot of folks on the call today who are in the industries of dentistry and dermatology. What's your familiarity? What might you share? I think all of the learnings, everything we've talked about today is applicable to any industry, but do you have any specific advice or experience in those spaces that you might talk about?
Well, I think one of the things that has to be particularly challenging today in aesthetic dermatology is the constant discounting for injectables that I find on Living Social, Guilt, and Groupon. I mean, just, as low as she goes. And to be quite honest with you, here in Chicago anyway, more of those offers are being extended by dermatology practices than plastics or facial plastics. I think that I do have experience with very high-end derms, and they charge a very hefty consultation fee and made very, very good use, unlike plastic surgeons, of the pre-treatment photographs. So I find people who are meticulous, of course, on their body and facial surgery patients, but just completely give it up on the filler patients. So I might articulate that. I would need to know what exactly those aesthetic derm practices were offering, and some obviously are derm surgeons, so some of the same points take place. I think.
Yeah, I would say that they know how to get a hold of you at the email on the screen, or at KarenZupko.com.
Exactly.
I think then, kind of looking at the last questions, one of the things you didn't touch on so much during the presentation, this is a question actually for me, so I apologize for the last 2 questions that we're maybe not going to get to from the audience, but you talked a little bit about the impact of having a rushed consultation schedule, having patients wait significantly past their scheduled consultation time. And for those that didn't attend one of our earlier webinars in which we talked about reputation, we all were able to share some hard data that showed that, number one of the biggest factors that's going to impact your online reputation are concerns related to timing. So making patients wait too long and then rushing them when they get into consult. And Karen, to what extent do you feel like this is a part of a broader approach to really respecting patients' time and to drive up, as I think we saw from the data supplied by Real Patient Ratings, that actually being better about respecting time has a direct correlation to closing rates or
I've got to say this.
Rates. Excuse me.
Ryan, absolutely positively. I have a client here in Chicago, and on one day he had 8 consults. Okay? 8 consults. I said, and that was the only thing. We weren't doing post-ops. We weren't going off on any tangents. No, you can't go in your office and look at email. You are going to stay focused. You are going to stay on time. There is going to be an assistant in the room with you. She's going to have a hand signal. You've really got to think about efficiently creating rapport and coming up with your recommendations. I have to say this. He was within 5 minutes of everybody's appointment time, and it was a bitter pill for him to swallow that 6 out of 8 patients all scheduled, because that was an unusually high scheduling ratio. I said, if you see these people on time, if you're respectful of their time, it is all going to go better, because people are cheesed off by the time they get in the room with you. They're worried about their parking meter if they're in an urban area where we pay to park. They are thinking about the fact that they've got to hurry up and talk fast because I've got to go pick up my kid. I mean, it's a losing strategy. Stop it. See fewer people. Make it a luxurious, a leisurely, a pleasant experience. It shouldn't feel like I'm in a gynecologist's office. If your reception room and your schedule and your staff are all running around madly, I think I'm in the wrong place. So
yeah, and I think maybe for me this is one of the themes of today's presentation I would encourage everyone to take away, which is, we've talked today about valuing and differentiating the doctor's time, the practice time, and I think it correlates really well to valuing and differentiating the patient's time. And I think both these ideas fit really well together. When you are doing a better job of articulating that value, you're charging for fees, you're seeing more of the right patients, you're able then to give them that higher caliber of service where they're waiting less and they're getting more of your attention, which translates directly to higher closures. So I don't think it's an accident. Both of us see practices that are charging for a consult are very often also closing at a higher ratio. On that note, we are coming up against the hour. Karen, thank you again so much for giving your time to our clients and our list of subscribers for our email list. I think today's presentation was really invaluable. Any last words that you'd like to share in closing?
it was a pleasure, and go forth with courage. You're worth it. You're worth it. Charge.